Morning, happy Friday. Today I'm going to read you kind of a funny book. It's called A Bad Case of Stripes. This is a classic. I don't usually read this to my pre-Kers. It's kind of a long one, so we'll see if they can understand it, but it's pretty funny. Her mother ran into the room and screamed too. "Oh my heavens," she cried. "You're completely covered with stripes." This was certainly true. Camilla was striped from head to toe and she looked like a rainbow. Mrs. Cream felt Camilla's forehead. "Do you feel all right?" she asked. "I feel fine," Camilla answered, "but just look at me." "You get back into bed this instant," her mother ordered. "You're not going to school today." Camilla was relieved. She didn't want to miss the first day of school, but she was afraid of what the other kids would say, and she had no idea what to wear with those crazy stripes. That afternoon, Dr. Bumble came to examine Camilla. "Most extraordinary," he exclaimed. "I've never seen anything like it. Are you having any coughing, sneezing, runny nose, aches, pains, chills, hot flashes, dizziness, drowsiness, shortness of breath, or uncontrollable twitching?" "No," Camilla told him. "I feel fine." "Well then," Dr. Bumble said, turning to Mrs. Cream, "I don't see any reason why she couldn't go to school tomorrow. Here's some ointment that should help clear up those stripes in a few days. If it doesn't, you know where to reach me." And off he went. The next day was a disaster. Everyone at school laughed at Camilla, and they called her Camilla Cran, the Night of the Living Lollipop. She tried her best to act as if everything were normal, but when the class said the Pledge of Allegiance, her stripes turned red, white, and blue, and she broke out in stars. That would be weird. That night, Mr. Harms, the school principal, called. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Cream," he said. "I'm going to have to ask you to keep Camilla home from school. She's just too much of a distraction, and I've been getting calls from the other parents, and they're afraid that those stripes might be contagious." Camilla was so embarrassed. She couldn't believe that 2 days ago everybody liked her, and now nobody wanted to be in the same room with her. Her father tried to make her feel better. "Is there anything I can get you, sweetheart?" he asked. "No, thank you," said Camilla. What she really wanted was a nice plate of lima beans, but she had been laughed at enough for one day. So when you want a special treat, do you ask for lima beans, which is a bean, or do you ask for ice cream or something else? Well, yes, I see," Dr. Bumble mumbled. When Mrs. Cream got on the phone the next day, "I think I'd better bring in the specialists. We'll be right over." About an hour later, Dr. Bumble arrived with 4 people in long white coats, and he introduced them to the Creams. "This is Dr. Grupp, Dr. Sponge, Dr. Cricket, and Dr. Young." Then the specialists went to work on Camilla. They squeezed and jabbed, tapped, and tested. It was very uncomfortable. "Well, it's not the mumps," concluded Dr. Krupp, "or the measles," said Dr. Sponge, "and definitely not the chicken pox," put in Dr. Cricket. "Or sunburn," said Dr. Young. "Try these," said the specialist. They each handed her a bottle filled with different colored pills. "Take one of each group before bed," said Dr. Krupp. Then they filed out the front door, followed by Dr. Bumble. So after all examinations, she doesn't have the chicken pox, she doesn't have the measles. I wonder what she has. Look at her face. They don't seem overly concerned. Oh my goodness. That night, Camilla took all of her medicine. It was awful. When she woke up the next morning, she did feel different, but when she got dressed, her clothes didn't fit right. She looked in the mirror, and there, staring back at her, was a giant multicolored pill with her face on it. That's crazy. I just took my allergy pills. I'm glad I didn't end up looking like that. Dr. Bumble rushed over as soon as Mrs. Cream called, but this time, instead of specialists, he brought the experts. Dr. Guard and Mr. Mellon were the finest scientific minds in the land. Once again, Camilla was poked and prodded, looked at and listened to, and the experts wrote down lots of numbers. Then they huddled together and they whispered. Dr. Gord finally said, It must be a virus, he announced to the authority, and suddenly, fuzzy little virus balls appeared all over Camilla. Or possibly some form of bacteria, said Mr. Mellon, and out popped squiggly little bacteria tails. Or could it be a fungus, added Dr. Gord, and instantly Camilla was covered with different colored fungus blotches. The experts looked at Camilla and at each other. We need to go over these numbers again, back at the lab, said Dr. Gord. We'll call you when we know something. But the experts didn't have a clue, much less a cure. By now, the TV news had found out about Camilla, and reporters from every channel were outside her house, telling the story of the bizarre case of the incredible changing kid. Soon a huge crowd was camped out on her front lawn. Oh, this poor, that's what she looks like. The creams were swamped with all kinds of remedies from psychologists, allergists, herbalists, nutritionalists, psychics, an old medicine man, a guru, and even a veterinarian. Each so-called cure only added to poor Camilla's strange appearance until it was hard to even recognize her. She sprouted roots and berries and crystals and feathers and a long furry tail, but nothing worked. One day, a woman who called herself an environmental therapist claimed that she could cure Camilla. Close your eyes, she said, breathe deeply, and become one with your room. Well, I wish you hadn't said that, Camilla groaned. Slowly, she started to melt into the walls of her room. Her bed became her mouth, and her nose was a dresser, and 2 paintings were her eyes. The therapist screamed and ran away from the house. What are we going to do? Cried Mrs. Cream. It just keeps getting worse and worse. And she began to sob. So there's her eyes, her nose, her mouth, there's her bow. At that moment, Mr. Cream heard a quiet little knock at the door. He opened it. And there stood an old woman who was just as plump and sweet as a strawberry. Excuse me, she said brightly, but I think I can help. So, she went into Camilla's room and looked around. My goodness, she said with a shake of her head. What we have here is a bad case of stripes. One of the worst I've ever seen. She pulled a container of small green beans from her bag. Here, she said, these might do the trick. Are those magic beans? Asked Mrs. Cream. Oh my no, replied the old woman. There's no such thing. These are just plain old lima beans. I'll bet you like some, wouldn't you? She asked Camilla. Camilla wanted a big, heaping plate full of lima beans more than just about anything, but she was still afraid to say it. Yuck, she said. Nobody likes lima beans, especially me. Oh dear, said the old woman sadly. I guess I was wrong about you. And she put the beans back in her bag and started towards the door. Camilla watched the old woman walk away. Those beans would taste so good, and being laughed at for eating them was nothing compared to what she's been going through, and finally she couldn't stand it. Wait, she cried. The truth is, I really love lima beans. I thought so, said the old woman with a smile, and she took out a handful of beans and popped them into Camilla's mouth. Mmm, said Camilla. There's her mouth. Suddenly, the branches, feathers, and squiggly tails began to disappear. Then the whole room swirled around. When it stopped, there stood Camilla, and everything was back to normal. I'm cured, she shouted. Yes, said the old woman. I knew the real you was in there somewhere. And she patted Camilla on the head, and then she went outside and vanished into the crowd. Afterward, Camilla wasn't quite the same. Some of the kids at school said that she was weird, but she didn't care at all. She ate all of the lima beans that she wanted, and she never even had a touch of the stripes again. So this is hard for you to understand this story, but what it means is she really, really loved beans, and her friends made fun of her for it because beans isn't something that a kid usually enjoys just to eat at lunch. So she was afraid to admit it. And guess what? She held that lion, and all of a sudden all these stripes started to appear. And once she admitted, yes, I love beans, she went back to normal. So don't be afraid to be who you are. Don't be like your friends. Don't be like somebody who you see on TV that you idolize. Just be you. Be you. Don't ever change. Be you. Don't be anybody else. So a bad case of stripes. I love it. I'm already outside today. My allergies are going crazy, but it's a beautiful day. Have a great weekend, and I hope you guys picked up your bags and enjoyed it. So we'll see you soon.